no installation required. Teach them to keep away from danger and come back to safety. Safely give your dog a life off leash. Wherever you go, it's a whole new world for you and your dog. Learn more at halocollar.com.
June 5th is less than 4 days away. At this point, any needless delay or any last-minute holdups would be an unnecessary and even dangerous risk.
Coming up next on Scripps News Live, the debt ceiling bill now in the Senate's hands. What's straight ahead as the U.S. stares down a hard deadline to avoid a catastrophic default?
Centers like this, they're here to uplift and celebrate, and also to fight when necessary.
Pride Month events kicking off across the nation right now, but it all comes as some state legislatures pass laws targeting LGBTQ+ youth and rights. Why groups in one state say that they are still planning to celebrate.
So we're expecting a busy season. 12 to 17 named storms of at least tropical storm strength or greater.
Hurricane season officially underway for the Atlantic. Why officials are asking everyone across the U.S. to be prepared this year, and the area that forecasters are already keeping an eye on. Scripps News Live begins right now. Hey there, thank you so much for joining us here on Scripps News Live. Great to see you. I'm Veronica Cruz. Well, right now, senators are racing against the clock in hopes of getting a debt ceiling bill passed before Monday's default deadline. And it is all up to the Senate. That bill clearing the House last night with bipartisan support. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is saying the chamber will stay in session until that measure is passed. Lawmakers need to get it to the president's desk by Monday or risk a catastrophic default. We've got all the bases covered for you right now. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull has the latest reaction from the Biden administration. But we begin right here on Capitol Hill with Scripps News congressional correspondent Nate Reed. All right, Nate, let's keep this short and sweet. Will the U.S. default? Will this bill pass the Senate?
This bill is expected to pass the Senate. It has the support not only of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, but also Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. And ultimately, given that both of them are largely supportive of this bill, it means that it's likely on a glide path to passing in the U.S. Senate and then going to President Biden's desk. The biggest question right now, Veronica, is when. We do not know yet what the timing is going to be for this bill to pass. Let's take a look at what the possibilities could be. For one, the House voted yesterday. That's set. It passed the House of Representatives. More Democrats voted for it than Republicans. But now a Senate vote is possible today. It's possible tomorrow. Could even be over the weekend. Either way, it's likely to occur before the deadline on June 5th, this coming Monday. That's the date by which the U.S. could default for the first time in American history. Senate Majority Leader Schumer warning that if the Senate doesn't get to this bill quickly and doesn't pass it quickly, there could be the possibility of a default. Take a listen.
June 5th is less than 4 days away. At this point, any needless delay or any last-minute holdups would be an unnecessary and even dangerous risk. And any change to this bill that forces us to send it back to the House would be entirely unacceptable. It would almost guarantee default. So again, the Senate will stay in session until we send a bill avoiding default to the president's desk, and we will keep working until the job is done.
Now, the biggest question, Veronica, is going to be those amendment votes. Senators want changes to this bill. Ultimately, they can't really change it because if changes are made, they'll have to pass it through the House of Representatives again. The House is out. I was just over there. It's completely empty on that side of the building. Ultimately, there can't be any changes, but senators still want to have their voices heard. They want to put up these amendment votes, and so it's likely the Senate will take a number of amendment votes at some point. Again, this bill is expected to pass the U.S. Senate. At the same time, I just can't answer that vital question for you right now, when. I would love to go to the spelling bee finals tonight. I'm not sure I'll be able to make it.
We really are running on a tight deadline here, Nate. I'm looking at the calendar. There are only a couple of days left, even though the majority leader is saying they're going to work through the weekend. You're talking about amendments, potential amendments, and you're saying that if things don't work out, it then heads back to the House, and they are now on recess. Is a default still possible? I mean, we're not really out of the woods quite yet.
Right. Well, look, senators can do a lot to delay a bill if they don't like it. So if a single senator decided they wanted to delay this for quite a while, they would be able to do so. It's the fact that this bill will pass is somewhat inevitable, but the timing is the biggest question mark right now. If a senator decides to delay this bill, it could theoretically be possible to push it past that June 5th deadline. A number of senators sounding off, saying that they're not fans of what's in this bill. Take a listen.
Well, I think we're being jammed by Joe Biden. We're backed up here against the X date, and this could have happened months ago. So I'm not happy with him. I'm not happy with the process.
I think this is one of the most ill-conceived ideas from national defense I have seen since the 2011 sequestration. The people who negotiated this, I wouldn't let them buy me a car.
And Veronica, what remains to be seen is whether these senators are just sounding off or whether they would actually take steps to hold up consideration of this bill and keep us here not only over the weekend, keep the Senate here over the weekend, but potentially delay passage of this bill till some point next week. Again, it's likely that some sort of agreement will be reached to speed up the consideration of this bill and get the Senate out of session sooner than this weekend. Again, we just do not know the timing. Bill is set to pass. The timing is the big question mark.
All right, I've got fingers and toes crossed right now, Nate, because if they get this done, then you are headed to the Scripps Spelling Bee finals. So I hope to see you there. All right.
You're
Nate
not wrong, yeah.
Yeah, Capitol Hill, Nate, thank you. Let's get you over to the White House now, where our Haley Bull is standing by for us. So, Haley, what has the president's reaction been like so far? Look, that bill sailed through the House with bipartisan support. What has he been saying?
Well, we're hearing a lot of optimism from White House officials, Veronica, and the president is urging the Senate to pass this as soon as possible. They really view this bill as a compromise, recognizing not everyone is going to be on board with it, but also believe it protects some of the key points in the president's agenda. And a big focus through this process that continues is on outreach to congressional members. We know senior staff are speaking with senators today. There have been conversations with each Democratic senator's office, and the White House has officials staying in contact with the leadership. The president spoke with congressional leadership, including Speaker McCarthy and Leader Schumer, following Wednesday night's House vote. President Biden stating afterwards, quote, "I have been clear that the only path forward is a bipartisan compromise that can earn the support of both parties. This agreement meets that test. I urge the Senate to pass it as quickly as possible so that I can sign it into law and our country can continue building the strongest economy in the world." Now, there have, of course, been concerns raised across the aisle here on this bill. It essentially freezes spending, but also suspends the debt limit into 2025, getting us past that 2024 election cycle. But despite those concerns raised, administration officials are really expressing optimism that this ultimately lands on President Biden's desk. Listen.
In the way legislation works, everything is negotiable. It depends on how many votes you have and where they line up. It's just a matter of agreement. What happened here was that reasonable minds, won. We got at the table, we talked, we came up with what the president thinks is a reasonable compromise. It's clear that not everybody's going to be happy. I mean, you have 535 members, 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate that have to agree on this as a board of directors, and you need to get majority votes. Last night's vote was overwhelmingly bipartisan and pretty lopsided. And so, hopefully we'll see something like that on the Senate sooner rather than later.
And senior officials are continuing to update the president throughout this process. So certainly the White House keeping a close eye on this, and we'll keep following those developments today, Veronica.
Sounds good. Haley Bull live for us there in front of the White House. Haley, thank you so much. So we know that this debt ceiling deal isn't a done deal until it gets through the Senate, lands on the president's desk, and he signs it. So all the uncertainty about this whole process and worries about a possible default can have consequences on our economy. To discuss what those impacts are, we have Justin Wolfhurst joining us now live. He's a professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan. Professor, thank you so much for your time today. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has been attempting to fast track this bill through the Senate, and there are senators that have serious objections to parts of it, as did some members of the House, like we just saw. I want you to go and take a listen right here to what Representative Pramila Jayapal had to say before that bill passed in the House.
It is my belief that it is important for us to have a very strong no vote for the president, for Democrats, for our party across the country that is watching this and saying, why are you kicking women over 49 years old to 54 off of food stamps and increasing the Pentagon budget and telling us that that's about fiscal responsibility? It's not.
So still, not all lawmakers are happy with this bill. Do they have time to negotiate further? And what impact will we see if it's held up in the Senate?
The process is designed really to make sure that the train's left the station and it's just going to keep on chuffing along until we get this thing passed. And so realistically, we're seeing both the left and the right-wing Republicans, the left wing of the Democrats, arguing against this bill. But realistically, the alternative is no bill, which is a default, and the possibility of a ruinous recession that would follow. So that's the reason everyone feels so confident this thing's going to keep going. It's not just the process, it's the absence of a better option here.
So let's talk about what would happen if the U.S. defaulted on its debt and what we would see in the markets. I mean, how has Wall Street been reacting to the news so far, and what are the fears? I mean, in terms of how this bill could impact, not just Wall Street, but also Main Street.
Right. So we haven't seen a big response on Wall Street, and there's a very simple reason for that, which is that Wall Street was much more confident than most Washington commentators that a debt ceiling bill was going to be signed. And at this point, it looks like Wall Street's right. And so when something happens that you always expected would happen, you don't need to reassess your view about the economy very much. And so that's why the response on Wall Street has been relatively muted. The other side of this is there are two really important things to think about here. The first is the real news, to the extent that there is some here, is not particularly good or bad news about the economy. It's that we have eliminated the relatively small but still important possibility of a genuinely bad outcome. It's a funny kind of good news to celebrate. Thank goodness something horrible didn't happen. And this budget deal, unlike many of the past budget deals, is actually quite small in magnitude. Realize that Republicans took all of taxes off the table. That left just spending. Well, within spending, they basically took all of mandatory spending off the table. That's 2/3 of the federal budget. Within the remaining 1/3, there's the military, and Republicans took the military off the table. So that leaves 1/6 of the federal budget over which they were negotiating. And the final deal is one in which they're going to fix spending for that 1/6 of the budget for a mere 2 years. All of that adds up to a number that when you write it down has a lot of zeros after it, but then you realize the US economy is enormous. And so it's still very small compared to the size of the economy. And so folks on Wall Street are anticipating that this might slow growth by maybe 0.1 or 0.2 percentage points. But it's really, in macroeconomic terms, a pretty small deal.
And I want to go ahead and stay with that thought quickly because, corporate America seems as though they've been responding with layoffs. And I don't know if that is in regards to what we're seeing right now with the debt ceiling, or is it because of the Fed continuing to hike interest rates? But if the U.S. defaults, what will we see in terms of layoffs? What does that do to the workforce?
Veronica, let me do what an economics professor would always do, which is stop you on the premise. He said corporate America has been all about layoffs. That's not quite right. Headlines have been all about layoffs, and that's because there are some small sectors of the economy, and they're the sectors that happen to have a lot of journalists covering them. Sectors like tech and in some parts of finance, where there have been a relatively small number of layoffs relative to the fact this is an economy with over 100 million workers. In fact, if you look at the number of people losing their jobs each week, we can look at the number of people filing for unemployment, for instance. It's at levels that are really rather low. The unemployment rate right now is at a 50-year low. Employment growth continues at rates that just a few years ago we would have regarded as being remarkably strong. So we have this strange sort of economy right now where a lot of news reports, the general vibe is that things aren't going well. But the reality, when we look at our economic statistics, is there's not a lot of layoffs going on, not an unusually high number, and actually a large number of people are looking around and finding better sources of work.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I know that like, to your point, Unemployment is 3.4%, which we haven't seen for more than 50 years. And every single time there's an economic print, it's strong. So it is quite strange that for the past 2 years as a journalist, I've been saying that there is this impending recession coming, which I don't know if we're in or if we have yet to see. So it has been confusing. What we do know is that if the U.S. defaults on its debt, it could be catastrophic. So let's say that the bill lands on the president's desk on June 5th, like it's supposed to. What are the positive effects that we will see immediately come from this bill's passage?
The positive effect is mainly going to be a big sigh of relief. The possibility to stab ourselves in the back, which is a really difficult thing to do, is something that Congress will have chosen not to do. If we celebrate that, let's celebrate. But the most important thing is on Wall Street, which is where we would have seen the first implications, they're going to breathe a big sigh of relief. In turn, that means that interest rates are not going to immediately spike. And in turn, the possibility of financial market disruption, of markets freezing up like they did in 2008, 2009, is largely off the table. So all of that means, let's come back to your other point, your broader point, which is for a year and a half, people have been saying a recession is just around the corner. I've been a pretty lonely voice saying, no, it's not. We're not in a recession. And it's been pretty easy to see why, because the numbers, which don't lie, keep telling us that things are actually going okay. So I was very optimistic, except for the possibility that this might knock us off. That possibility's gone. And so I think you can feel even more confident on June 5th than you were at the end of May that we're not currently in a recession and we don't see one starting anytime soon.
Well, Justin, you know, the definition of a recession is 2 quarters of economic contraction, which we have yet to see. We haven't seen 1 quarter yet. And the Dow right now is up about 250 points. The S&P and the NASDAQ have jumped about 1%. And the bill has only cleared the House. So hopefully we'll have some good news come Monday. Justin Wolfers is a professor of public policy and economics from the University of Michigan. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. Coming up next on Scripps News Live, the first few words from an officer could change what happens next in a traffic stop. We're going to break down a new study on those instances. Also, a man in Texas already convicted of murder 4 decades ago could be behind 2 other killings. What we know so far about that investigation next.
You're looking pretty good, Mr. Johnson. But we need to take some x-rays today.
That's all.
Yes, x-rays are expensive, but the front desk said you recently enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan with extra benefits that now cover today's x-rays and cleaning costs.
Wow, okay.
Well, Medicare Parts A and B do not cover your routine dental coverage like cleanings, fillings, or x-rays. Yes, you have a Medicare Part C plan, commonly called Medicare Advantage. Medicare Part C plans cover everything in Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits like dental, vision, and hearing.
Wow. That's great that my plan includes dental coverage that helps pay for these costs.
Yes, Mr. Johnson. A Medicare Part C plan could include dental coverage that pays for routine dental exams and teeth cleanings, dental x-rays, fillings, tooth extractions, root canals, dentures, implants, and crowns.
If you're losing coverage, moving, or new to Medicare, call to speak with a licensed insurance agent. You don't get a plan with these benefits automatically, so it's always good to call to see if there's a plan with extra benefits available in your zip code. If you don't have a Medicare Part C plan, call now because there may be plans available with additional benefits that are simply not covered under Medicare Parts A and B, like routine dental coverage. In fact, 24 million Medicare beneficiaries do not have any dental coverage. Here's the good news. If you're on Medicare, you can call even if you called last year. We will check to see if there's a Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. Remember, you don't get Medicare Part C benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2023 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-614-5203. 800-614-5203.
Shopping for Father's Day is hard.
Actually, it's easy.
You never know what to get him.
Just give me steak.
It has to be perfect.
Yep. Dads want steak. Right now, Omaha Steaks is offering Dad's favorite gift package that includes 4 of our exquisite bacon-wrapped filet mignons, 4 air-chilled boneless chicken breasts, boneless pork chops, Jumbo Frank's dessert, and more. All for just $99.99. Save 61%. Order today at omahasteaks.com/TV and you'll get 8 burgers free. Now that's what I'm talking about.
Scripps News investigates stolen orphans in Ukraine. Jason Bellini takes you through a year of following this story, meeting Dennis, a Ukrainian orphan, at the start of the war, then forcibly kidnapped by Russian forces. Now, the desperate attempts to bring him home.
If we will not rescue him, he will die as a Russian soldier.
Scripps News investigates the stolen orphan. Tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Scripps News Tonight.
Pleaded guilty to the murder of an 8-year-old girl in 1982 is now facing 2 more murder charges. 62-year-old Raul Mesa Jr. has been arrested for stabbing an 80-year-old man to death last month and strangling a woman to death in 2019. Police zeroed in on the suspect after he called the police to confess to the killings. And now police are reopening several other cold cases to see if he's connected to any of them. Correspondent Tony Waterman joins us now from Austin, Texas, with the very latest on that investigation. Tony?
Police believe Raul Mesa Jr. could be responsible for a dozen murders in the Austin area, including a number of cold cases. He is behind bars right now after making a very chilling phone call to police late last month, describing in detail, authorities say, how he killed his elderly roommate. And during the course of that call, police say he also confessed to killing a woman a few years back, and authorities believe that woman is Gloria Lofton, who was found strangled to death in her home in 2019. And police say that Mesa's DNA matches the DNA found at the scene. This is an individual with an extensive criminal record dating back to at least 1975 when he was 15 years old and he shot a convenience store worker during a robbery. He was meant to serve 20 years, but he was released just a few years later in 1981. And then the following year, he confessed to killing and sexually assaulting 8-year-old Kendra Page. And as part of a plea deal, he was meant to spend 30 years behind bars, but was again released early, just after 11 years on time served and good behavior. One of the officers who worked on that case calling Mesa's convictions and early releases a travesty of justice.
Here's a guy that should have spent the rest of his life, probably from the time he nearly killed a gentleman when he was 15 years old, certified as an adult, later commits capital murder, pleads to murder, is released 11 years later, and has killed how many people we don't know. So here's a serial killer that justice was not served. So it was a travesty of justice.
Police say when they arrested Mesa on Monday, they found some disturbing items in his possession, including a backpack that contained duct tape, zip ties, and a gun. And they say that Mesa told them he was ready to kill again. So police are now trying to figure out if Mesa is responsible for a number of other unsolved murders in and around Austin. One thing they say he doesn't appear to be connected with are the 8 bodies that have been pulled from Lady Bird Lake in downtown Austin in the past year. Some in the public have speculated that a serial killer is on the loose, but police have consistently maintained that there is no evidence of foul play in these cases, saying that while tragic, some of them are plain accidents and others have been suicides. Tony Waterman, Scripps News, Austin.
Now to Missouri, where a judge has sealed court documents in the case of an elderly white man accused of shooting a black teenager who mistakenly came to his door. A lawyer for 84-year-old Andrew Lester cited threats against his life since the shooting. That attorney says Lester has had to move 3 times due to threats. The victim, Ralph Yarl, had gone to the wrong house to pick up his 2 siblings. Lester told police he was scared to death and thought he was about to be robbed. The first 45 words spoken by police officers during a traffic stop could predict what happens next, whether it stays a routine stop or escalates. That's what researchers found when examining encounters between police and black drivers. Scripps News Justice correspondent Jamal Andres takes a closer look at the study and its findings. And we do want to warn you right here, some of those images might be difficult to watch.
I have to
tell you, I do have a firearm on me.
Many controversial police shootings or violence begin as routine traffic stops. Philando Castile, Patrick Leoya, George Floyd, and others.
Let me see your hands.
Damn, man.
Stay in the car. Let me see your other hand.
I'm sorry.
But a new study says the first few words from an officer to a motorist can help predict whether a stop will escalate.
Simply in these escalated stops, the officers gives an order, a command, right? Put your hands up, get out of the car. But no reason explaining why the driver is stopped.
Dr. Eugenia Rowe found if the first 45 words from an officer to a black motorist are commands rather than a greeting or an explanation for the stop, it is much more likely the stop will escalate to handcuffing, vehicle search, or an arrest. The study examined body camera footage of 577 traffic stops and found 81 of them resulted in searches, handcuffing, or arrests.
We found no instances where the driver refused to comply with an officer's command or answer an officer's question. The majority of the driver's responses are answers or explanations to the officer's orders, questions, and there are no instances where the driver is not complying with the officer in every single one of the escalated stops that we examine.
The onus is always on the police officer, the trained professional.
Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey is a 20-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department, and she says the officer's behavior has an immense impact on the outcome of a stop.
Something as simple as an explanation can avoid all sorts of other problems, because at the end of the day, the goal is for everyone to go home safely, the police officer as well as the citizen. And then when an officer just starts barking out orders, well, now you run the risk of having now the citizen become elevated in their response.
In some jurisdictions across the country, city leaders and police departments are cutting out minor traffic stops completely. Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, and several other cities are experimenting with banning minor traffic stops, arguing they overwhelmingly impact black motorists, aren't especially helpful in stopping crime, and can have fatal consequences. Sergeant Dorsey says while she agrees black people are often mistreated by police, she does not believe this is the answer.
Well, that sounds sexy until you have a civilian who pulls over somebody with an expired tab who happens to be a serial killer or somebody who's wanted for robbing a bank. Now you have the civilian dealing with this armed and dangerous individual, because again, traffic stops are the most dangerous interactions a police officer can have.
The study also documented bias in who was pulled over and what the outcome was for those stops.
97.8% of the drivers who experienced one of the three escalated outcomes were Black, which is why we limit our study to Black drivers.
Rose said while she wanted to include white motorists in this study, she couldn't because it happened so infrequently in comparison to Black drivers. Jamal Andrus, Scripps News.
So to come on Scripps News Live, June marks Pride Month, and some members of the LGBTQ+ community have been celebrating. That's despite actions by state legislatures to restrict their rights. Why some are saying they're still planning to honor the month. And what are we expecting to happen to the debt bill in the Senate? The new hurdles that the measure is now facing after a quick break.
This is an important message for anyone and everyone on or eligible for Medicare. If Medicare is important to you, then you need to hear this message, because Medicare benefits matter to millions of Americans. Did you know Medicare has different parts, including Medicare Part A and Part B, often called Original Medicare? And then there's Medicare Part C, representing Medicare Advantage plans, and Part D for prescription drug coverage. Call 800-912-2786 now for your free Medicare coverage checkup. We can look up your plan and see if you're missing out on a plan with extra benefits, or if your income qualifies you to reduce costs on your prescription medications. Did you know there are different enrollment periods, like the Medicare annual enrollment period, when beneficiaries can enroll in or change coverage? But there are also certain conditions or qualifications that may allow you to qualify for a special enrollment period any time of the year. So call the number on your screen now for your free Medicare coverage checkup. This is a free service that you can call at absolutely no cost to you.
I'm on Medicare. I called to see if my income qualified for lower prescription medication costs. The friendly agent was very knowledgeable, and I found out I qualified for a special enrollment period, so I'm so glad I called.
We can look up your plan and see if you are missing out on a plan with extra benefits. We can also check to see if your income qualifies you to reduce the cost of your prescription medications. And we can even tell you if you qualify for a special enrollment period. It's your free Medicare coverage checkup at absolutely no cost to you. Just call 800-912-2786 and you can speak with a licensed agent who can check up on your plan and answer your questions. The Medicare Benefits and Questions line is open and anyone on or eligible for Medicare can call. The call and Medicare coverage checkup is free with no obligation. Call now. We love talking to people with Medicare, and the call is free. Just call 800-912-2786. 800-912-2786.
There's a lot to watch on TV these days. Problem is, most streaming options are incredibly pricey, and you'll end up paying for the local channels you can get for free. Luckily, there's a solution. Sling is only $40 a month. And you get awesome stuff like sports, news, and today's hottest TV for half of what the other guys cost. If you already get free locals with an antenna, now you can easily add the channels you're missing with Sling. It's the TV you love for a price you'll love. Visit sling.com/antenna to learn more.
My anxiety became overwhelming, like I need help. I just found hers, like, this is pretty incredible. Right away, I got matched with a provider. I noticed a huge difference. Medication brought me all back together. Get started today at forhers.com.
When Lila was ready to sell her ring, she sent it to Worthy, where they took care of everything and auctioned it on her terms. Then, Worthy sent Lila her money. Get what you're worth at worthy.com.
Welcome back to Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Dela Cruz. 31 minutes after the hour. Let's take a look at some of the other stories that we are keeping an eye on for you today. Tiger Woods' ex-girlfriend is asking a Florida judge to rehear her case. Erica Herman is trying to get out of a non-disclosure agreement that she signed in 2017 at the beginning of her relationship with the golfer. Her lawyer says there were a number of issues that were overlooked during a hearing last month. She's being accused, or is accusing Woods, rather, of sexual harassment, citing the Speak Out Act that allows NDAs to be nullified in harassment or assault cases. A judge has denied that request. So the White House is set to impose sanctions in Sudan, and that's after two rival generals failed to abide by a ceasefire in an ongoing war there. The sanctions include visa restrictions for specific people, including officials from the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. The State Department is saying members from those factions are responsible for undermining Sudan's democratic transition. And Macy's and Costco have been raising the alarm about the U.S. economy. Macy's cut its annual profit and sales forecast after customer demand dropped earlier this year. Costco is also reporting that some customers are switching from expensive steaks and beef to cheaper meat like pork and chicken. Both stores say that they have seen a drop in middle and higher income shoppers. Want to get you now to the latest on the debt ceiling. A measure to raise the nation's borrowing limit passed the House last night with an overwhelming bipartisan vote. It now heads to the Senate with only a few days until the potential default deadline on Monday. And a lot of focus has been on how this bill is going to fare in the Senate. Scripps News national correspondent Joe St. George takes a closer look at what obstacles the legislation could face.
Well, no one here in Washington is hanging the crisis averted banner just yet, but the temperature involving this entire debate has been turned down dramatically. It's barely simmering at this point after the House of Representatives passed the debt limit deal brokered between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden. The vote happening late Wednesday by an overwhelming margin, over 300 members of the House voting for the deal. In the Senate, the legislation enjoys wide bipartisan support as well. Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democratic Majority Leader, as well as Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican Minority Leader, have signaled support for the legislation, and both want it passed quickly. There are some members of the Senate who would like to see some changes. They want amendments voted on. For instance, Senator Tim Kaine, the Democratic senator from Virginia, is furious that the deal includes a pipeline project in West Virginia. The amendment process is significant here because if any amendment actually passes, it would have to go to the House of Representatives for another vote. Senate leadership is trying to prevent that. For the moment, it looks as though President Biden will get to sign the legislation sometime this weekend ahead of the June 5th deadline. As a reminder, the deal not only suspends the debt limit until January of 2025, not making it an issue until well after next year's presidential election. It claws back some unspent COVID relief dollars. It suspends some funding for the IRS going forward, caps funding overall for the federal government, and also reinstates those federal student loan payments. Once the president signs it, federal student loan payments will begin 60 days after that. Joe St. George, Scripps News, Washington.
It is June 1st and the kickoff to Pride Month, but this year's celebrations follow a series of laws targeting trans rights in Republican-led states across the country. Sean Delancey with Scripps News Cincinnati explains how that legislation has been impacting events in northern Kentucky.
The normally fun and boisterous events here at the Northern Kentucky Pride Center had a sense of nerve injected as lawmakers in Frankfort passed laws targeting LGBTQ rights and kids. President Bonnie Meyer says that they're still here to be proud and recognized, but the stakes are definitely higher. PhD is performing at the Northern Kentucky Pride Center in front of a smaller audience than normal. She says the conversation surrounding trans people, particularly trans youth, has been elevated.
Resources and centers like this, they're here to uplift and celebrate, and also to fight when necessary. And I think these days it's necessary.
This LGBTQ youth celebrating event with games, food, and bracelet making
all together, they kind of clash.
Comes in the wake of the Kentucky legislature passing sweeping legislation, keeping kids in the bathroom of their biological sex, banning teachers from discussing sexuality or gender identity, and banning all gender-affirming care for those under 18.
Knowing that people want to stifle that, restrict it, is quite literally a life and death matter.
NKY Pride Center President Bonnie Meyer asked us not to show the faces of LGBTQ kids and their allies because of the current political climate.
That's why we're here tonight, is because over certainly the last couple of years, but this legislative session in Kentucky was an attack on LGBTQA plus kids.
David Walls, executive director of the Kentucky Family Foundation, defended the bills, however, saying they would protect youth from making a major change too young.
What we're talking about is chemical and physical mutilation of children's bodies.
There are high tensions on both sides, with Walls calling for no violence heading into and during Pride Month events.
Our hope is always for peaceful. We believe in peacefully advocating in the battle of ideas.
Back at the NKY Pride Center, PhD worries trans kids will be harmed under Kentucky's new laws.
I don't want that blood on my hands. Do they?
And that was Sean Delancey there reporting for us from Covington, Kentucky. Now, in the meantime, the LGBTQ plus community has been turning out in full force for Gay Days in Florida. That celebration has been around now for a decade. Participants say that they are not about to allow recent anti-gay laws passed in the Sunshine State to spoil their fun. Organizers say a big turnout will send a message the LGBTQ plus community will not be intimidated. Coming up, Pride has been celebrated for decades, but how did LGBTQ rights get to where they are today? Scripps News correspondent Alex Miller talks with one man who started his civil rights journey more than 60 years ago. Again, that is straight ahead at 4 p.m. Eastern, only on Scripps News. The police chief of Davenport, Iowa, is saying that 3 people remain unaccounted for in the rubble of an apartment building that partially collapsed on Sunday. 2 others previously feared missing have turned up safe. The city has shared structural engineering reports that show that the building's owner was told that patches of the brick facade were separating from the building. In other news at this hour, NASA is planning to release its final report on UFOs next month. The agency held a public meeting this week sharing the findings of an ongoing study. Scripps News national correspondent John Moan explains what NASA is hoping to achieve with all of this research.
Friends?
E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home.
Or foes? NASA is trying to separate science fiction from science fact when it comes to extraterrestrials and UFOs. Unidentified flying objects are a thing of the past. NASA now calls them unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs.
And it's now our collective responsibility to investigate these occurrences with the rigorous scientific scrutiny that they deserve.
On Wednesday, the agency televised an hours-long panel on UAPs featuring 16 independent experts, including retired astronaut Scott Kelly, the first American to spend nearly a year in space.
And my Rio thought, the guy that sits in the back of the Tomcat, was convinced we flew by a UFO. So I didn't see it. We turned around. We went to go look at it. It turns out it was Bart Simpson, a balloon.
The agency says this is the first step in explaining previously unexplained phenomena. It's using unclassified data so it can provide as much transparency as possible to the public.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Dude.
No secret military data is included, like anything to do with the suspected spy balloons from China spotted in U.S. airspace earlier this year.
Unclassified data make it possible for our team to communicate openly to advance our understanding of UAP, not only with each other, but across the scientific community and to the public.
By having open discussions, NASA hopes to remove the stigma around UFOs that has hampered data collection. The panel says members have faced online harassment because of the subject matter.
Harassment only leads to further stigmatization of the UAP field, significantly hindering the scientific progress and discouraging others to study this important subject matter.
A recent congressional hearing revealed the federal government has received more than 500 counts of UAP sightings. NASA is expected to release a final report in July. John Moan, Scripps News, Houston.
Coming up next on Scripps News Live, the Atlantic hurricane season is now underway. How officials have been preparing everyone to be ready for these brewing storms. And a quick reminder, we'd like to hear from you. You can always give us a call on our Scripps News viewer hotline. That's toll free, 1-833-4-SCRIPPS. Again, that's 833-472-7477. Share your comments and your story ideas.
Scripps News investigates a Ukrainian orphan kidnapped by Russian forces.
If we will not rescue him, he will die as a Russian soldier.
The Stolen Orphan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Scripps News Tonight.
Are you ready for a fresh new bath or shower? Well, now is the best time with 50% off installation and no interest and no payments for 1 year. Hi, I'm Christina, and it's time to flip your old worn out bath or shower with Jacuzzi Bath Remodel today. Everyone knows the Jacuzzi brand. They're the most trusted name in water for over 60 years. But did you know they can install a gorgeous bath or shower that feels incredible in as little as 1 day? It's no stress and no mess with a lifetime warranty. Now let's talk beauty. You deserve to start and end your day in a beautiful space that feels great and is custom designed just for you. So call or go online now to see the Christina preferred designs like Canyon, Farm, and Urban. Now that's the total bathroom beauty that I love at a price you can afford. And how about safety? Like an ultra low profile, easy entry shower, complete with grab bars and a custom designed seat. You deserve safety and peace of mind without sacrificing style. Because with all the worries in daily life, taking a shower shouldn't be one of them.
Every time I stepped over my old tub, I worried I might fall. I don't have those fears anymore. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel gave me a gorgeous shower that's safe too.
I've been trying to get him to remodel that bath for years. I called and they did in just 1 day.
And at a price we could afford.
With one call to Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, you can effortlessly transform that old, ugly eyesore into the stunning bath or shower of your dreams that you'll love for years to come.
Call or go online now to jacuzzibathremodel.com to get 50% off installation. Plus, ask how you may qualify for no interest and no payments for 12 months. And when you call right now, we'll give you our complete safety upgrade for free. Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-218-1279. That's 800-218-1279. Call now.
Are diapers destroying your confidence? Men's Liberty can help. Our discreet external device is safe, sanitary, and keeps you dry 24 hours, day and night. Step into the spotlight and do more of what you love with Men's Liberty. It's been ordered over 5 million times by thousands of satisfied fans. Call now to get a free week supply with your first order. There's no obligation, just the opportunity to try the most revolutionary solution to incontinence ever made. Unlike diapers, Men's Liberty is a long-term answer to dealing with incontinence. Make the choice to finally move forward with your life by calling Men's Liberty today. We'll answer all of your questions about how our completely unique device works and how Medicare can cover it. Dealing with expensive, uncomfortable diapers is no way to live. Men's Liberty lets you get back out there with more freedom and confidence to be you. Ready to find out more about our offer to get a free week supply? Then don't wait. Call Men's Liberty today.
I don't get paid until next week.
I got you. I'm Dave, and I can spot you up to $500 of your future money instantly.
Up to $500 instantly? What else is in my future?
A new couch. Oli!
Get up to $500 instantly with Dave.
There's a better way to begin your mornings.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Rush.
On the stories that will shape each day.
There's a new study that might make you feel a little bit better.
So you can get on with yours. Morning Rush. Weekday mornings starting at 7, 6 Central. Only on Scripps News.
June 1st marks the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, and already forecasters have been watching a disturbance in the Gulf of Mexico. The National Hurricane Center says that system could form into a tropical depression or a tropical storm. If it does develop into a tropical storm, it will be named Arlene, but it should stay offshore. And NOAA, in the meantime, has been projecting a near normal year for hurricane activity. That means 12 to 17 total named storms, at least 5 of which could become hurricanes. They're also predicting up to 4 major hurricanes, and those are Cat 3 or higher storms. Officials with the National Hurricane Center say no matter what, everybody across the country should be prepared.
It only takes one storm affecting your area to make it a busy season for you. So everybody across this country and across the Atlantic Basin, Eastern Pacific, coast of Mexico, has to prepare as if they're going to be affected this year by a storm where you live in your community.
2020 marked a record-breaking year with 30 named storms and 7 major hurricanes. And since then, the number of storms has declined steadily. Last year saw 14 named storms, and 2 of those were major hurricanes, Fiona and Ian. One of the most dangerous parts of a hurricane or a tropical storm is that storm surge that you see right there. It's the water that's pushed onto shore by a storm's winds. That water can be deadly. In fact, the National Hurricane Center says storm surge during Hurricane Katrina led to hundreds of deaths. During Hurricane Ian last September, catastrophic storm surge battered the Florida coast with peak surge reaching 10 to 15 feet above ground level near Fort Myers Beach. And this year, NOAA has been upgrading its surge prediction model. Elizabeth Copeland from Scripps News Tallahassee explains how it could help protect coastline property and save lives.
It's been nearly 5 years since Hurricane Michael's storm surge flooded Shell Point.
It was a chunk of piling about this long by about like that, just riding on a wave hitting the door, and that's what broke it.
Michael Gitman was here when it happened.
Turned this whole downstairs into a washing machine.
The National Hurricane Center says the storm drove about 7 feet of water into this area. Water and wave action that upended Frank Massersmith's property in Oyster Bay.
I had 3 docks ended up in my yard, one of which came in, hit one tree, rolled over, and tore out my steps up to my house in the back of the house.
Well, the Big Bend is actually extremely vulnerable to storm surge.
Cody Fritz is a storm surge specialist with the National Hurricane Center.
And that really has to do with how deep the water is, not just near the coast, how shallow the water extends away from the shoreline.
I stand just under 6 feet tall, and hurricane winds can push this water inland over 12 feet. So that's almost twice the height of me.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is upgrading its storm surge model. The upgrade will help predict where the water will rise. We'll also do a better job of predicting how far inland water may flood.
And that's good news for a lot of our Gulf coastline communities, many of which, like Shell Point, lie under 10 feet above sea level.
We haven't really had a storm like that make a direct hit here at Shell Point for probably since before the 1900s.
Mark Powell is a former employee of the National Hurricane Center, and he also lives in Shell Point.
When they're developing their storm surge predictions, they have a way to account for different sizes of storms, different intensities, different motion.
Predictions that these neighbors will be watching closely this hurricane season.
And that was Elizabeth Copeland there from Scripps News Tallahassee reporting. In the meantime, officials in Virginia are starting early with hurricane season preparation. The Virginia Department of Emergency Management has been working with a team of experts to set up hurricane protocols. The agency is encouraging residents to create digital preparation kits for their phones and other devices. They're also being urged to follow instructions from rescue teams and get familiar with insurance plans and their local evacuation zones. All things that you don't want to be stuck figuring out if and when disaster strikes.
Allow yourself to make that tough decision when the time comes, and don't wait too long.
And Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin says that he wants people to remember one basic theme: run from water, hide from wind. Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, dreams are coming true for some of our nation's best young spellers.
You're given to face a difficult challenge, a word, and you have to spell it right in front of a lot of people. And I find that like so special.
She's just so cute. Coming up after a quick break, Scripps National Spelling Bee finalists are sharing how they plan to step up to the challenge with a sharp focus on that $50,000 grand prize. We also want to remind you right here to follow us at Scripps News on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Kirk Kaiser, and did you know the average funeral costs around $10,000? And if you don't have enough insurance to cover funeral costs, credit card debt, and other expenses, your family is going to get stuck with the bill. Don't let that happen. Call right now. And if you're over 50, you can get up to $30,000 in affordable life insurance, and your acceptance is guaranteed. That's right. If you're over 50, you can't be turned down for this insurance, regardless of your health. Plus, there's no medical exam and no health questions. Your rate will never go up. Your coverage will never go down. And rates start as low as $5 a week. Your coverage begins as soon as your application is received. Don't wait until it's too late.
Just call 800-760-7793.
Coverage is guaranteed regardless of your health and cannot be canceled without your approval. Don't leave your family with a huge bill for your funeral. With one fast and easy call, get up to $30,000 in affordable life insurance to help cover funeral expenses and credit card debt, and maybe even leave something for your kids and your grandkids. Remember, if you're over 50, you can't be turned down, regardless of your health. There's no medical exam and no health questions. Best of all, your rates start as low as $5 a week, and your rate will never increase. Nothing is more important than family. So don't leave them with a lot of bills to pay when you're gone. Don't leave your family with a lot of bills to pay for your funeral. Call right now. Acceptance is guaranteed. Call right now.
Call now. Call 800-760-7793. That's 800-760-7793.
How does Klein Inspector get among the most big verdicts and settlements of any law firm in the country? Because Klein Inspector is an award-winning team with 5 doctor lawyers, the most of any firm in the United States. And that's why the New York Times calls Klein Inspector a powerhouse law firm. So if a defective product, motor vehicle accident, or medical malpractice caused a catastrophic injury, call Klein Inspector.
When Lila was ready to sell her ring, she sent it to Worthy, where they took care of everything and auctioned it on her terms. Then, Worthy sent Lila her money. Get what you're worth at Worthy.com.
The Athletic. Subscribe today.
Swimming free again after spending 3 weeks in recovery. Argentina's Mundo Marino Foundation says the young male had a wound on its neck, and that was from a plastic strap typically used in industrial packaging. The sea lion was returned to the ocean along with 2 other recently recovered animals. And some big news tonight is the night we're soon going to have a new Scripps National Spelling Bee champion. The competition started with more than 200 spellers. Now It's down to the final 11. National correspondent Maya Rodriguez introduces us to the last ones standing.
It's been a long road for some of these spellers, some of them spending months, if not years, pursuing their dream to make it to the B. And now they are in the final round. Ahead of tonight's final competition, we spoke to some of the finalists about what it took to make their dream a reality.
When they are up on stage, it comes down to one particular face-off: speller versus the dictionary. Correct. But just getting the chance to step onto this stage takes hard work and lots of time. Making it to the finals, a vindication of it all.
At least for me, it's taken years of preparation. I've been participating since the 3rd grade.
11 finalists for the 2023
For now, there is a joy these finalists get to share together for about 24 hours. And then it's back on stage to see who among them will be the new champion. It's a stage that Sarah Fernandez of Omaha, Nebraska says she can't wait to return to.
Some people are here in the audience, some people are on TV. You're given to face a difficult challenge, a word, and you have to spell it right in front of a lot of people. And I find that like so special because there's nothing else that is equal to that feeling.
A nearly century-old spelling bee kept young at heart, thanks to the youthful exuberance of these spellers.
The relief part is still setting in, and the nerves you felt throughout the whole day are still coming out.
And while some of these words may seem to be tongue twisters, in some ways, it's not the toughest challenge these spellers face. There's also the waiting and anticipation and knowing how to handle the pressure.
Sometimes you'll reach a tough spot or be doing a particular list that's extremely difficult. I think the main thing to do is not give up.
A spelling journey that is now nearing the end for each finalist.
When you think back on this week, what sticks out in your mind for you?
How much the competition has progressed. We had 229 spellers and now it's down to 11. I'm very excited. I'm very happy. I can't believe I made it this far.
But there can only be one winner, and that's thanks to the spell-off, which B officials created after an 8-way tie back in 2019. We saw it used for the first time last year, but the question is, will it be needed tonight? We'll just have to tune in to find out. Maya Rodriguez, Scripps News, National Harbor, Maryland.
And you can tune into a live broadcast of the Scripps National Spelling Bee Finals tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on ION and Bounce channels. Coming up next, lawmakers still racing to beat the clock to avoid a default where the debt ceiling bill stands as it now heads to the Senate floor. I'm Veronica Del Cruz. Thank you so much for joining me today. Chris Stewart is up next right here on Scripps News Live. Don't go too far.